Are we live streaming? Thank you. Good morning all. Welcome to the Development Management Committee. Before we get through onto the agenda, I'll just ask members of the committee to introduce themselves so that our visitors know who's who when it comes to people talking. So could I start with you, Councillor Jury?
I'm Councillor Neil Jory. I'm the elected member for Milton Ford Ward.
Councillor Sam Wakeham, Hatherley Ward.
Tony Leach, Oakhampton North.
Jeff Moody, Tavistock North.
Alistair Cunningham, Buckler Monacorum.
Steve Guthrie, elected member for Drew Stainton Ward.
Ursula Mann, Tavistock North.
Caroline Mott, Bridestow Ward.
I'm Bryony Hanlon. I'm the case officer for the application.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Fairbairn, Head of Legal Services and Monitoring Officer and the Committee's Legal Advisor this morning.
Good morning, Jacqueline Houselander, Head of Development Management for West Devon and Lead Officer for this meeting this morning.
Councillor Rick Cheadle, Buckler Monacorum. I chair the Planning Committee.
Councillor Terry Southcott, Bridestow Ward. I'm Vice Chair of the Planning Committee.
Cathy Hoare, Democratic Service Officer for West Devon.
Thank you all. I was going to ask for apologies for absence, but doing a head count, see that we're all here, so I won't bother with that one. The next item on the agenda is declaration of interest. In accordance with the Code of Conduct, members are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in connection with items to be considered at the meeting. Are there any declarations of interest? Fine, thank you very much. Items requiring urgent attention, none have been brought to my attention. So confirmations of the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of May. Councillor Mott.
I have a query, please, if I may, Chair, about DM&L point 57. It talks about the appointment of vice chairman, but it says in the absence of the committee chairman. I wonder if that needs to be changed, please.
Sorry, you have to run that one past me again.
The headline of DM&L 57 talks about the appointment of vice chairman. It then goes on to state, in the absence of the committee chairman, nominations were sought for the appointment of a vice chairman.
The chairman that should have been sought.
The last meeting.
Yeah, and we then appointed Councillor Southcott as to be chair for the meeting, and we then went on to nominate and appoint Councillor Mann to be vice chair of the meeting. So it's just clarity, please, for that point. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't helpful there, but I wasn't at the meeting, so I was unable to pick up what you were there talking about. Other than that, any other points of the minutes of the last meeting? We now come on to the only planning application on today's agenda, which is application 030224, Woolacombe Farm, Lifton Down. Application for approval for reserved matters following outline approval reference 253121, relating to access, appearance, landscaping, layout, scale for erection of a dwelling for a farm manager, together with access drive, plus the discharge of conditions 6, 7, 8. I will now turn to the planning officer for her brief. Thank you.
Apologies, Chairman. There was just a run through from members of the public as to how the committee will approach the planning application this morning. Apologies, members will have heard me say this on a previous occasion. The starting point for the committee this morning is a statutory requirement that when making decisions on planning applications, the committee must have regard to the policies in the development plan, In this case, the development plan is the joint local plan and to many made neighbourhood plan, and must also have regard to any other material planning considerations. Material planning considerations are those matters that are concerned with the use and development of land in the public interest. Anything that doesn't serve that purpose is irrelevant, and the committee will not take it into account. Not only must the committee have regard to the development plan, but any decisions must be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations suggest otherwise. The rationale for this is that the development plan is intended to be a carefully drafted and considered statement of policy published to inform the public of the approach which will be followed by the committee in decision making unless there's a good reason to depart from it. The committee will consider whether the proposed development complies with the development plan as a whole. The joint local plan, like other development plans, contains broad statements of policy, and it's not unusual, indeed very likely, that one or more policies that apply to the proposed development will pull in different directions. So a development proposal may be in accord with the development plan policies which, for example, encourage development for employment purposes, and yet be contrary to policies which seek to protect the open countryside. In such cases, there may be no clear-cut answer to the question, does the proposal accord with the development plan? The committee will therefore make a judgment bearing in mind such factors as the relevant importance of the relevant policies and the extent to which the development proposal complies with them or does not. Chairman, thank you. That's all I need to say this morning.
Thank you very much. I will now have the officer's report.
Okay, so this one is at Woollerden Farm in Lifton Down, and it's an approval of reserved matters. Okay, so the application is for the approval of the reserved matters of an agricultural farm manager's dwelling. So this is a very high-level site location plan. The question marks are just a quirk of the mapping system that has no bearing on the application at all. So you can see the farm shop at the top of the screen in a peach colour. There's an access track down through the first couple of fields. And then the rectangle is the site that we visited where the dwelling will actually be placed. This is the aerial view, just to give you a bit of a wider context. This obviously is the official site location plan with the main road in blue at the top. This shows you the block plan, so the footprint of the dwelling, and then you've got the garage at right angles, and then there's the paved area for parking and turning. Plan sections and elevations, I'm sure you've all had a look at these when you read the report, but just to give you a general idea of what the dwelling will look like. And we've got the sections just to show how the internal accommodation is fitted within the pitch of the roof. I have blown up the ground floor plan for you, just so that you can see in a bit more detail. So on the right-hand side, that's the residential accommodation. So you've got a dining area, living area, kitchen, and a utility. In the centre, you've got the double-height glazed stairwell. And then if we move to the left-hand side of the screen, there are two offices that you can see. The top one is for the farm and estate manager's conference room. The one at the bottom is for the holiday accommodation and wedding venue estate manager's office. And then if we go out to the left again, you've got a utility and a shower. So that's the more conventional farm workers sort of functions that you would see, you know, your boot room, that kind of thing for wet boots and muddy coats. And then we move to the first floor plan. So if we start on the left this time, we've got the farm office and a file store. And you'll note that there's no internal door between that section and the residential accommodation, so that just keeps it separate. So there are 4 bedrooms on the first floor, And then on the right-hand side, that smaller footprint, that is for the ensuite and dressing room for the master bedroom. And then right at the top, you've got the footprint of the balcony. This is the south elevation. So some of you asked on the site visit whether the boundary hedge would be retained. The answer is yes. And the applicant has provided the plan to show what that would look like in situ. And obviously you've got the trees behind. And these are the photos from the site visit, just to jog your memory. So you've got the farm shop and the car park entrance. We look south across the road. The farm track will sort of follow down the centre of the screen along that tree line. This is the gateway between the application site and the other fields, but the access track isn't coming through this part of the site. This is just to show you the distance. This is the main field where the dwelling will be sited. And this is the boundary hedge we just saw on that plan, so you'll remember that from the site visit. And then this just gives you a view beyond the boundary hedge. So I was standing in the field to the south of the application site, just to provide some context. This is a holding map from the outline application. So the areas in red show the land holding at the time the application was submitted. And then you've got a big blue arrow to show where the dwelling was granted consent. This is just to show you what the case officer saw at the time the outline consent was granted, to help you understand how they arrived at the location that they did. Although that's not for consideration because the outline consent is granted. So it's refused for 4 reasons. So the main one is the quantum of both farm-related and residential floor space hasn't been supported by an essential agricultural need in this specific location. The size of the dwelling means it's unlikely to be affordable for an agricultural farm manager in perpetuity. And that's a requirement of policy TTV 26. So if you want to find that in your hard copies of your policy, that would be the time to do it. And the side effect of a dwelling being that large is that when considered together with the large areas of glazing, it will have a detrimental impact on landscape character and tranquility. And there are the policy references there. There is insufficient information to demonstrate that the surface water drainage can be accommodated within the red line boundary, and insufficient information to discharge some of the conditions. Now, those conditions could be submitted through an application at a later date. So those are not sort of significant issues as such, but we do need to consider them. So that's why those are put there for you. And we have recommended refusal.
Okay, thank you very much for that, and also for a very comprehensive report. Are there any questions for the planning officer from members of the committee at this stage? No? Okay. We have 3 registered speakers today, and the first is Mr. Peter Wonnacott, who is the agent. If you'd like to pop up here to the committee. Yep, he'll be fine.
Mr. Wonnacott, would you like a particular plan on the screen while you're speaking?
Okay, I'm sure you're familiar with this procedure. You have 3 minutes to tell the committee whatever it is you want to. Start when you're ready.
Right. These reserved matters are for a dwelling approved on an outline permission, not just for a farm manager's dwelling as suggested in the report, but for a manager's dwelling for an extensive integrated family business run over 540 acres employing 165 people and encompassing breeding livestock of 300 cattle and 400 ewes, growing agricultural and horticultural crops, 50 acres of these including polytunnels, a holiday letting and wedding venue business with over 300 bookings per annum, and the large farm, shop and restaurant. Both Mr and Mrs Mounts are hands-on managers of the whole business and need to live in a dwelling that is central to and sufficient in size to serve all aspects of this large integrated business. This is the basis on which the outline planning permission was granted. The report alleges the principle of approval of the OPP was based solely on the site being centrally located and thus giving the applicant the ability to live close to livestock and crops, but this does not properly reflect the background to the approval of the OPP. Throughout both the OPP and the Reserve Matters applications, there has been emphasis on all aspects of the integrated business. The occupancy condition wording on the OPP confirms this through allowing occupation not just by an agricultural worker, but by persons working in agriculture and all the business known as strawberry fields and all the business known as Woollerden holiday cottages, thus covering all aspects of the applicant's business, not simply the agricultural one, and undermining the suggested refusal reason about remaining affordable for an agricultural worker. The primary refusal reason states the amount of residential space in the dwelling at 248 square metres is excessive and indicates 124 square metres as a guide, notwithstanding that West Devon has no policy relating to size for rural workers' dwellings. The comments on residential size in the report have been guided by Torridge District Council policy, the out-of-date annex to PPG 7 and current national space standards. National space standards, by the way, are minimum floor space standards and not maximum. And there is no guidance for the space for business space. The site has been approved for a dwelling, so there will be a dwelling of some sort there at some stage. So the argument regarding impact on landscape character is one of degree. The site, as you will have seen, is well screened with few public views into it from any of the surrounding landscapes. We consider the design of the proposed dwelling would sit well in the site and not harm local landscape character. The amount of glazing on the south-facing elevation, incidentally, has been significantly reduced by 45% from previous plan proposals. Regarding the other refusal matters, the surface water drainage could be conditioned, although it is not a conditional requirement on the outline planning permission. Details to satisfy the concerns on the other conditions were submitted in March this year, and as yet I've had no response relating to these. The committee's support is requested for the proposed dwelling for this large integrated family business, and I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, and well done for keeping almost 3 minutes. Are there any questions for the agent from members of the committee? I have one. I wonder if you could put up the map from the original proposal, which showed that's the one. Where is the livestock kept inside that red
If you drop down vertically from where the arrow point is, I can't quite see it from here, but there's writing down below it. I don't know whether you can magnify it or not.
Okay, it's just that when we were on the site.
It's in that area where the writing is, but just to the left-hand side of the writing. So it goes. You see where it says Woollerden Farm?
Yep.
That's the holiday complex, and then just down a tiny bit more, and then to the left of that are all the farm buildings.
And that's where the livestock.
That's where all the livestock are kept. Yeah. There's a whole range. I don't know how many thousand square metres of buildings there, but there's a lot of buildings down there. And they've got approval, incidentally, for another large building that they're just about to start work on.
I'm aware of that. Yeah. Any other questions for Mr. Woolacott? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next registered speaker is Councillor David Massey from the Parish Council. Thank you very much. If you'd like to come and join us. Welcome to the committee.
Hello. Oh, we pronounced it right that time.
And you have 3 minutes to...
I won't need that long, Chair, but thank you very much.
Off you go.
As I've been introduced, I'm the Vice Chairman of Lifton Parish Council. We've considered as a parish council the earlier application and the recent amended application. We did feel it was somewhat incongruous to refer to the application as a farm manager's accommodation, as it quickly became apparent during our discussion that it would be used for other admin purposes, for other aspects of the business. This in part might account for the projected size of the building. However, having noted the revisions in the proposed plans, the parish council voted unanimously to support the application. Thank you. Within my 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Very succinct. Any questions by the committee for the parish council? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next registered speaker is no stranger to this committee, Councillor Chris Edmonds, who is the ward member. Well versed on the procedures of this committee. As you know, you have 5 minutes to say what you wish to say to the committee. Start when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I've called this application into committee because there is no specific policy guidance regarding the scale and size of agricultural dwellings in the countryside. The Council's agricultural agent has objected on the grounds of the size of the proposed dwelling and affordability over the longer term. In the absence of specific guidelines, the agent refers to previous policy guidance, including local authorities with set guidelines on size. The agent also refers to what he feels are relevant planning appeal decisions. The policy guidance considered by the agent included, in the words of the agent, the now defunct PPS 7 relating to sustainable development in rural areas, the Somerset District Council local plan adopted in 2006, and a Torridge District Council supplementary planning document. The agent refers to 2 planning inspectorate appeals relating to applications refused on the grounds of scale and affordability. One of the appeals is dated November 2013, the other January 2015. Both refer to applications in Dorset. One had 64 hectares of land, the other 59 hectares, plus some rented land. How much weight should be attributed to these historic planning guidelines and inspectorate decisions? They rely on a policy framework that, in the case of PPS 7, had already been superseded. Turning to the planning officer's report, which concludes that the quantum of residential floor space proposed has not been supported by an essential agricultural need and is unlikely to remain affordable for an agricultural farm manager in perpetuity. My understanding of the business is that, in effect, there are 4 businesses in operation: the Strawberry Fields Farm Shop, Horticulture, Agriculture, and the Woolerton Estate. The 4 businesses are dependent on each other to trade effectively, and the combined businesses employ a total of 165 people from Lifton and surrounding areas. The total farm size of 540 acres includes 50 acres for horticultural use, and there are significant livestock holdings of 300 cattle and 400 ewes. The Woolerton Estate is a wedding and events venue plus self-catering accommodation. The applicants are both full-time managers of the combined businesses and are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The proposed dwelling is located centrally to the businesses, ensuring that the owners are on hand to respond to the welfare needs of their livestock and the frequent and often urgent demands of a multifaceted business operation. As I think you can appreciate from my comments, this is an established, highly successful business, clearly demonstrating a strong agricultural need and a requirement for a dwelling that is commensurate with a business of this size. This leads me on to the affordability aspect of the application. I would challenge the assumption that a dwelling of this size is unlikely to remain affordable for an agricultural farm manager in perpetuity. No business can guarantee its future financial sustainability. But in this case, this family-owned and run business has every likelihood of remaining affordable in the longer term. As we have heard, the Parish Council supported the application and there are no third-party objections. So as I near the end of my 5 minutes, how do I arrive at my recommendation? Do I look back to historic, out-of-date policy guidelines relating to other planning authorities and planning inspectorate reports dating back to 2013? Or do I look at the application in front of us today on its own merits and keep in mind our corporate plan, the council plan, a forward-looking plan that supports our local businesses and the contribution they make to our local economy? I've no desire to look back. So I conclude, members, that the dwelling is justified in terms of scale, design and affordability, subject to effective all-year-round landscaping measures, mitigation of lighting impacts, and the provision of adequate information for surface water drainage and the discharge of outstanding planning conditions. I therefore support the application.
Thank you very much, and spot on time. Thank you very much for that too. Are there any questions from the committee for Councillor Edmonds? I have one. You took us through the various elements of the business that make up the whole. Do you know where those functions are run from presently?
Beg your pardon. The farm shop, and I think some from a separate venue elsewhere in the locality, and maybe some from home even. I'm not absolutely sure, but I think at the moment it's fair to say that work would be spread around various locations, and I guess one of the advantages of being able to centralise that work, that admin, that management, would be good business practice for the overall business.
Sorry, any other questions from members for Councillor Edmonds? Thank you very much. Right, well, we've had an opportunity to ask questions of the registered speaker and the planning officer. So I take it there are no further questions from members of the committee, but we are in debate if you wish to make any comment before we go to a vote. Has anyone got anything they wish to say?
I'd like some clarification on the original outline planning permission. The way it was read out by the agent seems a little bit odd to me.
So what's the clarification that you need?
Exactly what the application was for.
Okay, so the wording on the decision notice says, outline application with some matters reserved for the erection of a dwelling for a farm manager together with access drive.
Thank you.
Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just mulling things over. I feel somewhat conflicted. Clearly what we have here is an exceptional local business. Those of us that have lived in the area for a while have seen this business grow and can't fail to have been impressed by what the family have done with this business and developing it into what it is today. I think it was mentioned they employ over 150 people, and clearly I would like that business to be supported. Against that, in my mind, the main policy that we should be considering here is TTV 26. I don't know whether that would be confirmed by the planning officers. And TTV 26 is to meet an essential need for a rural worker to live permanently at or near their place of work in the countryside. I think the inclusion of some business functions within this building makes me question whether those functions could be somewhere else, perhaps around the shop site, where there is already an established business use, thereby making the footprint of the proposed house smaller. But I also question whether it's an essential need for the property to be in this location. That essential need, by my understanding, is usually where there's animal husbandry involved and a need for somebody to be on site 24 hours a day. And whilst I therefore feel that I'd like to support the business, as I said, I am feeling rather conflicted that I don't feel it meets that particular policy. So, yeah, I'll give it some further thought as other people might say anything.
Thank you for that. Any other comments, Councillor Guthrie?
Well, I thank Councillor Jury for really stating already what was in my mind about the actual location in relation to the work required there, and similarly about the size and massing. So I would reiterate that we would all like to support and see farmers and land use being really thriving, which is an essential part of our community. But again, I feel exactly conflicted in the same way that Councillor Jury said.
The Senior Planning Officer would like to say a word.
Well, I just wanted to perhaps help members with policy TTV 26 in that the first part of the policy looks at isolated development in the countryside and whether there an essential or exceptional circumstances have been demonstrated. Clearly, when the outline planning application was considered and approved, the officer at the time and the committee, if it was a committee decision, agreed that there was a need for an agricultural worker on the site. And so the principle, if you like, of a dwelling on that site is established. However, what I would suggest to you now is that you need to consider the second part of the policy in your considerations here today, which talks about the impact of a development on the countryside itself, and where and what types of development would be approved. I think that hopefully might help in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moody.
Thank you very much for that, and Councillor Jory for your input. I too just have a concern about the business accommodation within the dwelling, and I just wanted to just ask officers: is there a relationship to the size of the building, the number of acres, and the size of the business, the number of acres, and the size of the accommodation?
So they have to have enough land and enough business activity to support the actual dwelling itself. So they have to financially sustain it, and they have to be able to sustain that in perpetuity. But there's no sort of calculation. So you have 10 acres, so you get a dwelling of 100 square metres. It doesn't work quite like that. But then by the same token, it isn't the case that, the bigger the business, the bigger the house. There isn't that relationship necessarily either. So it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. We use national space standards as a starting point. The agent's quite right, they are minimum standards, not maximum. And where applicants exceed that, we need to understand what the need is given the isolated location.
Councillor Mann.
I just wanted to ask about the size standards, because in reading the decision, there were quite a few numbers that were presented across about what would be appropriate. And there doesn't seem to be clear agreement. I mean, clearly not the size of the dwelling that's proposed, I think, is clear from the examples that were cited. But my concern is that it's unclear, and I'm just wondering, has it been communicated what West Devon's planning team thinks is an appropriate size to them?
So the agricultural consultant has set out some appeal decisions where 140 square metres is kind of an acceptable place to start. And again, it is a case-by-case basis, so if people want more, then they need to justify why that's the case.
Have any other members of the committee anything they wish to say before we take this to the vote? No? So the recommendation for this application is refusal. So those supporting the officer's recommendation, please show.
It's unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous. The officers.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a clarification on the reason for refusal. It should be TTV 26-2 as opposed to TTV 26-1.
Okay.
1.
Or
So we'll
just
make that
TTV
change if
26.
yeah. If that change is acceptable. Okay.
As it stands?
As it stands.
Okay. So the application is refused. Okay, thank you very much. We now move on through the agenda. Find it. I think it's undetermined majors next. Yeah, undetermined major applications. You're right, absolutely right. Yeah, skipped a page. Appeals. You can take us through any interesting ones.
One appeal proposal. Just bear with me 1 second while I bring up the plans. So I'm just going to go through the appeal. Is just one appeal, which I need to talk to you about, but I'm just having to log into the meeting, so bear with me 1 second. Taking forever. Let me in, Kathy. Seems like somebody needs to let me in the meeting, saying it. I need to share my screen, so yeah. It's okay, I'm in now, thank you. Right, so I just need to share my. So this was an application. This was an application for, there had previously been a Class Q development on this site for 3 dwellings. Pardon? Oh, that's weird.
Following the script in your 4439.
Sorry, I don't know why it's not sharing. Oh, it's because this is being shared. Can we unshare the current slide, please? Apologies, members, for this. Thank you. It's okay, I've got it. There we go. Sorry about that. I think it was say computer error, but probably operator error is probably more the issue. So this application, yes, as I say, was this is to do with this building here. Was previously applied for to be converted under the Class Q provisions to three-bedroom dwellings. It was refused for a number of reasons. First of all, its unsustainable location. Secondly, its the impact of the development on the rural landscape. I'll just move and show you the impact of the development on the landscape. So that single building was going to be replaced with three individual dwellings, barn knocked down, whereas previously the proposal had been for, in the Class Q, was just to convert that single building to three dwellings. So as you can see, it has a much more impact on the surrounding area and the landscape within which it sits. And the inspector agreed both with the unsustainable location and also the impact it was going to have on the rural environment within which it's set. There was another reason which related to insufficient information, in fact, two reasons relating to insufficient information. And the inspector, as is their wont, was not so convinced by those reasons, but was very much convinced that this was an inappropriate development in the countryside. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions on that one before we move on? So we move on now to undetermined majors. That. We have our old friend, the Wool Grading Centre.
Yes, we do. That is, I think there's a slightly more, I'm trying to get slightly more detailed information from the officers on this report so that we can see whether any progress has been made. With this one and the two for the Wool Grading Centre, the applicant wanted to submit a further set of plans. I recall telling you probably quite a few months ago that the case officer was going to suggest that the application be refused, but gave the applicant one more chance. There are significant issues on this site, flooding being one, and so those plans and additional information is out for consultation. And in fact, there's a potential meeting that I'm going to have with the planning portfolio holder and the applicants and the local ward members within the near future to try to see if we can resolve this application and reach a conclusion of some sort.
It would be good to get it off the books.
It would.
Going through, the only other one that caught my eye was the Plymouth Road one, only because Plymouth Road applications have been a complex story, and I thought it might be a useful idea to have a committee briefing on just where we are with Plymouth Road in terms of the overall sort of situation. I don't know if other members of the committee would find that useful.
So a new planning application has been submitted for the Plymouth Road allocation, which is obviously an allocation in the joint local plan. There are specific matters within that allocation which the development needs to meet. It's both an employment and a housing site. The current application is a completely new application, so it has no relationship with the previously approved outline and reserve matters, which went through obviously just on the smaller Baker Estates land. This application is for 250 dwellings and the remainder of the employment land in the allocation. The application is submitted in a hybrid format with 150 or so dwellings in detail and 150 or so dwellings, or 175 in outline only. The application hasn't been valid for that long. It's currently in the consultation phase of the planning process, so that means all the consultees are coming back with any comments they may have. The case officer, Adrian Noon, is reviewing those as they come forward. And also any public representations which may be going to be submitted are also, this is the time when we would expect those to be submitted as well. There's not much more I can say about the actual application at this stage because we're waiting for information to be submitted, but happy to answer any questions.
Well, I mean, the only point I was making, I'll come to you in a minute, Councillor Moody. The only point I was making was, we've had a long history with Plymouth Road. Ups and downs, as it were, and I think the committee would just want to get its mind around the totality of what's going on to be absolutely clear before they come to determine the application. So when the time is right and we've got the information we have, try and pull together an all-members briefing. Councillor Moody.
Just wanted a clarification of what is the square meterage of employment floor space on this application, if any at all.
I don't know the answer to that. I'll just look it up and I will give it to you in a second, if that's okay.
Any other questions on any of the other major applications awaiting approval? Sure, the planning officer will come back.
Yeah, if I come back to you after the meeting, if that's okay.
Councillor Mann.
It's been raised through the neighbourhood plan around access points. Is that already in that application, like the road access? Is that, or is that?
And I don't know the exact location of it, so I can find that out and tell you outside the meeting if that's acceptable.
This item is primarily about progress and where applications are, rather than the detail of the applications.
Exactly that. I just wanted to put the whole thing into some form of context, because this has been a long and winding road, and we just need to be absolutely sure when we do come to determine it, we know exactly what it is we're dealing with. That's all. Councillor Mann.
Jack, you introduced it by saying it's a brand new application. Does that mean it is brand new as in unstarted?
Sorry, when you say unstarted?
There was a question, I think, about whether or not this application had already been approved, and I'm just curious as to whether we're dealing with that in that way.
Chairman, we'll speak outside the
Okay,
meeting.
any other matters before I close the meeting? Nope, thank you very much. Stop the live streaming. Yeah, if you just hang fire for a second, there are a few sort of bits and bobs we'd like to go through. I might start, and then David wants a word. It's been raised in discussion that sometimes with these complicated planning applications and the ones that come